If you shiver at the sight of a needle, imagine a medieval doctor placing a live rat on your festering wound, then stitching it in. No anesthesia, no antiseptic, just blood, screams, and the desperate hope that this might save you. In the darkness of history, long before humans understood bacteria or blood circulation, fear gave birth to treatments so grotesque they were called medicine. Leeches draining blood, crushed venomous snakes smeared on skin, urine used as mouthwash, and live rats employed as tools to draw sickness from the flesh. You think this sounds like myth? It's not. These were real practices, recorded in manuscripts, ancient journals, and the blood-stained notes of those who survived. Today, I'll lead you through that doorway, where doctors didn't save lives, they helped people survive hell, where medicine and torture were separated by nothing more than a stitch. Welcome to medieval medicine, a blood-soaked chapter in human history if you dare to look back on. Imagine living in the 13th century. You're burning with fever. You cough up blood. Or worse, you hear whispers no one else can hear. Your family carries you to see a doctor, but he doesn't wear a white coat. He wears a dark robe, carries a pouch of herbs, and chants something in a forgotten Latin tongue. There are no blood tests, no x-rays. His diagnosis might depend on the color of your urine, the taste of your phlegm, or the pattern of flies hovering over your bed. In the medieval mind, the body was ruled by four mysterious fluids called the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Every illness, from headaches to hallucinations, was believed to come from an imbalance between these ancient forces. Feeling depressed? Too much black bile. Quick to anger? Yellow bile has overheated. A strange rash? Your blood is too hot. It needs to be drained. That's why bloodletting was one of the most common treatments of the time, and why leeches were the surgeon's favorite companion. But that was only the beginning. They believed disease was divine punishment, that demons could dwell inside your brain, your intestines, even your womb. That if you fell ill during a full moon, it wasn't coincidence, it was a curse. Their world had no doctors as we know them, only wanderers who drifted between the edges of knowledge and belief, half physician, half sorcerer. Imagine yourself in the midst of a medieval village, cloaked in fog and superstition. The plague has taken hold, and the air is thick with fear and the smell of decay. In such desperate times, any hope, however strange or terrifying, becomes a lifeline. This was the world where the live rat method found its place and eerie practice. That still sends chills down the spine of anyone who hears about it today. Stories from 13th and 14th century Europe speak of certain folk healers and barber surgeons who believed that placing a live rat upon a wound or abscess could somehow draw out the illness. It sounds like something out of a dark fairy tale, but these accounts are rooted in real historical texts and folklore. The logic behind this bizarre method was steeped in the medieval understanding of the body and disease. People believed that illness was caused by bad humors or evil spirits trapped inside the body. The rattan animal, often associated with disease and death, was paradoxically seen as a carrier that could absorb these malevolent forces. By placing the living creature in direct contact with the afflicted area, it was thought that the rat would suck out the sickness, absorbing it into itself before eventually dying, taking the disease along with it. Practically, the process varied. Sometimes, a rat was placed alive onto the swollen or infected area, often an abscess or tumor. In other cases, the rat might be confined within a makeshift pouch, or even sewn under the skin, close to the infected site. The patient would endure hours, sometimes days, with this living creature pressed against or inside their flesh, hoping for a cure. The psychological torment must have been immense. The sensation of claws scratching, teeth biting, and the looming threat of the rat's movements under the skin would have been enough to terrify anyone. And yet, many patients believed in the power of this strange treatment, clinging to hope as infections ravaged their bodies. Of course, the live rat method often ended in tragedy, without any knowledge of germ theory or antiseptics. Such interventions almost guaranteed severe infections. The rat itself could introduce more bacteria, worsen the wound, or cause gangrene. Mortality rates among patients treated with this method were undoubtedly high. But why did this practice persist? Why did people resort to such extremes? The answer lies in the context of medieval medicine and the overwhelming desperation of the time. The Middle Ages were plagued literally by diseases like the bubonic plague, leprosy, and countless infections with no known cure. When conventional remedies failed, folklore and superstition filled the void. Healing was as much a spiritual or magical act as a physical one. The live rat method fit neatly into this worldview, combining tangible animal symbolism with a ritualistic element that gave patients a sense of agency. However faint, this method is also emblematic of the blurred lines between healer and charlatan during the medieval period. Barber surgeons, herbalists, and local wise men often mixed practical knowledge with superstition. Without formal medical education, many relied on ancient texts, oral tradition, and trial and error, leading to practices that appear grotesque or nonsensical today. Historians debate how widespread the live rat method truly was. Some suggest it was limited to isolated regions or specific communities, while others argue it was more common but shrouded in secrecy due to its grisly nature. Whether fact or folklore, the legacy of this method paints a stark picture of human suffering and the lengths to which people will go to survive. In some ways, the story of the live rat is a cautionary tale showing us the dangers of ignorance and desperation, but also the resilience of hope in the darkest times. It challenges us to appreciate the leaps modern medicine has made while reminding us that medicine in this history is as much about fear and folklore as it is about science. So, was the live rat method real? Evidence suggests it was, at least in pockets of medieval Europe, carried out by those desperate to fight disease in any way they could. It stands today as one of the most disturbing chapters in the annals of medical history, a haunting symbol of an era when darkness ruled both body and mind. As the Black Death swept across Europe in the 14th century, it brought with it not only the stench of death, but the smell of desperation. A third of the continent's population would vanish. Within a few short years, entire villages collapsed into silence, churches overflowed with corpses, and the air thickened with rot and incense. Medicine, as crude as it already was, descended even deeper into chaos, without microscopes, without understanding of germs or infection. Doctors became little more than gamblers, placing desperate bets on rituals, herbs, and bodily fluids. Some treatments were odd, some were repulsive, and some unbelievably are still recorded in the annals of history as serious attempts at healing. Let's begin with the humble leech in medieval Europe. Leeches were considered powerful tools for rebalancing the humors. Remember those for mystical fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. If your body was thought to have too much blood, the cure was simple: remove it. And what better way than with a creature that did the dirty work for you? Doctors, or more often barber surgeons, would carry jars of live leeches. These slippery, glistening creatures were applied directly to patients' foreheads, temples, armpits, groins, and even eyelids or genitals. The goal: drain the bad blood, and with it hopefully the fever, infection, or madness. Patients would sometimes be covered in a dozen leeches at once. Bleeding could last for hours. Some fell unconscious, some never woke up, and yet they returned again and again to the bite of the leech because the alternatives were far worse. Now let's enter the world of plague cures, those concoctions made not in laboratories, but in back alleys, butcher shops, and the pages of mystic grimoires. Feces, human feces, mixed with vinegar, dried under the sun, and applied directly to swollen lymph nodes. The logic? If the body is full of poison, then perhaps a more powerful poison, something truly foul, could cancel it out. In another variant, pig dung was combined with crushed herbs and wine, then smeared across the chest of the sick. Some healers even recommended burning feces, inhaling the fumes as a way to cleanse the lungs. Let's not forget urine. Yes, urine aged for 7 days was collected in clay pots, often left to ferment into a putrid, ammonia-rich liquid. It was used to wash wounds, gargle, or even serve as an eye rinse. Medieval apothecaries called it aqua vita, the water of life. The belief was simple but tragic. If something smells horrible, it must be strong. And strength was needed in an age when death could knock on your door without warning and take your entire family in a week. There were also animal-based treatments of grotesque creativity. Some cures involved roasted cat intestines tied around the neck. Others used dried frog carcasses placed directly on plague sores in hopes the swelling would transfer to the amphibian. But perhaps the most disturbing of all was this: inserting a live chicken's rear end onto the plague bubo. Yes, physicians instructed patients to shave a chicken's bottom and strap it, backside down, to the inflamed lymph node. The chicken, poor creature, would convulse, peck, squawk, eventually die, and when it did, another chicken was brought in. The treatment continued until either the patient or the poultry expired. We look back on these practices today with a mix of horror and disbelief. How could anyone think excrement or animal torture could cure something as monstrous as the plague? But remember, these people didn't have the luxury of disbelief. Their families were dying. Their priests were silent. Their rulers were clueless. And their doctors, well, they were trying everything, anything. In the void left by science, faith twisted and desperate took its place to bleed, to vomit, to burn, to rot. If it might save a single life, it was worth the attempt. And in that mad rush for salvation, medicine became not a science, but a dance with death itself. In the Middle Ages, mental illness wasn't treated, it was punished. If you heard voices, saw visions, screamed into the night, or even laughed at the wrong time, you weren't considered sick. You were possessed to the medieval mind. Madness was not a medical condition. It was a spiritual infestation of demonic force nesting within your soul, whispering blasphemies, distorting your body and mind. And the only cure was violence. Enter the surgeon priests, the mad doctors, and the self-declared exorcists of the age. They didn't ask you about your feelings. They didn't offer therapy. Instead, they reached for knives, drills, and fire. One of the most horrifying procedures of the time was called trepanning or trepanation. This ancient technique involved drilling a hole directly into the human skull, often without anesthesia. The goal: to release the demons trapped inside your head. And while it may sound mythical, trepanning was performed for centuries across Europe, often in monasteries or makeshift clinics. Under the flickering light of candles, imagine it: a wooden table, a crude metal drill, no sterilization, no sedation, the patient bound in ropes, screaming as steel bites into bone. Some patients died from shock, others from infection, but those who survived were often hailed as cured. No more hallucinations, no more voices, just silence, perhaps because their minds were never quite the same again. Then came something even darker: brain cauterization. If a patient was deemed too violent or uncontainable, some doctors used long metal rods, heated until glowing red, and inserted them into the nasal cavity straight toward the brain. The idea? Burn away the madness at its root, literally. This method, crude as it sounds, was an early and accidental precursor to the modern lobotomy, but in the medieval world, it had no scientific justification. It was spiritual warfare, carried out on the softest flesh imaginable. There are accounts of patients twitching, spasming, then going completely still, never to speak again, to their families. This was a blessing to history. It's a tragedy. Other so-called treatments included whipping the mentally ill to punish the demons, drowning or near suffocation as a form of purification, forced fasting, where patients were starved for days to make their bodies uninhabitable for evil spirits, chaining patients in darkness, often underground, so that the madness would burn itself out. And perhaps worst of all, they did these things with the conviction that they were saving souls. They truly believed they were helping. Today, we look at these methods with horror, rightfully so, but to understand them is not to excuse them. It is to see how deeply fear can shape medicine, how easily suffering can be masked as salvation, and how often the mentally ill have been treated not as patients, but as prisoners of their own minds. In the flickering torchlight of the Middle Ages, There was no line between surgery and superstition. A doctor's blade could be holy or hellish, and a single hole in the skull could mean the difference between madness and martyrdom. In the darkest corners of medieval medicine, there was one truth few dared speak aloud. Sometimes the cure was worse than the disease, and sometimes the cure was death. When nothing else worked, not the leeches, not the rat, not the holy chants or the bleeding bowls, healers turned to methods that straddled the line between ritual execution and medical salvation. One such method was partial burial. The afflicted, feverish, delusional, or paralyzed would be buried up to the neck in earth. The belief that the earth would draw the illness downward and out of the body. Some never emerged. Another practice, controlled hanging, a noose tightened, just enough to starve the brain of air, not to kill, but to purge. If the patient lost consciousness and survived, it was seen as divine cleansing. If they didn't, it was God's will. Others were beaten with herb-soaked whips, lashed until their skin broke and their blood mixed with bitter leaves, a symbolic washing of sin, pain, and plague. All these methods shared one thing. They treated the body as disposable, a vessel to be wrung out, emptied, and if needed, sacrificed. To die under the hands of a healer wasn't murder, it was mercy, a final attempt to bargain with forces no one truly understood. In a world without answers, where demons danced in shadows and God rarely spoke, death was not failure, it was the final medicine. We look back now, from the safety of clean hospitals, sterile tools, and anesthetic dreams, and we ask, how could they believe in such horrors? Rats stitched into wounds, urine as medicine, fire pressed to the skull. But belief is a powerful thing, and in the Middle Ages, belief was all they had. No microscopes, no antibiotics, no understanding of viruses, infections, or the immune system. What they did have was fear, and the desperate hope that anything, even suffering, might be enough to save a life. These were not stupid people. They were survivors, trying to outwit death with whatever tools they had: leeches, prayers, knives, and fire. Some of them truly wanted to heal. Others simply wanted to help. But in their hands, medicine became a ritual of blood, a sacred violence cloaked in robes of mercy. And perhaps, one day, centuries from now, future generations will look back on our practices, our surgeries, our pills, our chemicals, and ask, how could they believe in that? Because history always casts its longest shadows over those who tried the hardest to bring light. This is the memory of medieval medicine, a place where pain was truth, blood was prayer, and blind faith was the only cure.